Hey, everybody, welcome to Pink Shade. It's Mary Payne here, and I've got Brandy and Julie from the Dumb Gay podcast to talk about a real disturbing and upsetting and not uplifting at all documentary called Quiet on Set about child actors and piece of shit Dan Schneider. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
It's pouring rain here, which just you can probably hear it, which is probably just a sign of what a big piece of shit Dan Schneider is.
Could you believe it, you guys? I mean, I obviously am not young enough to watch these programs, but my kids sort of fell in that window of they didn't watch too much of those Nickelodeon shows. Like they sort of knew of the Salmon Cap and they knew of Victorious, but it didn't hit them at the exact right. Or I would have been like, if it was anything about any of these Disney shows that they had to watch, which probably that's coming next, I would have known so much more about it. But the Salmon Cat, I just remember Ariana Grande was the Sam of Salmon Cat. And I thought something's wrong with her. Like she's so airheady and stupid. And then when you see her on the red carpet, she didn't talk like that, but it was like a character she was playing. But I really thought that was what her voice sounded like. So when I heard her sing, I was like, is that the same girl? Because she talked like this on the show. Like she was real dumb. Like there was something really off with her. That's how she talked on the show.
Yeah, I've been imitating it around here.
Oh,
because it's so jarring and bizarre.
Yeah. Like I thought that's what she really sounded like in real life. I didn't know that she was like method acting or.
No, apparently now we know the man in charge wanted her to sound like a $2 hooker that he picked up in Vegas or on the street. Because apparently that's how every girl on Nickelodeon should act like, according to Dan Schneider.
Yeah.
Or.
Yeah, totally. And did you guys read Jeanette McCurdy's book?
No.
You guys, it's really good.
I bet.
It's really good. And again, I didn't know Jeanette McCurdy from Salmon Cat, from whatever the other show she came. I didn't know. So I just read the book going in it as like, oh, she's just one of these like Disney Nickelodeon stars. And I was just like, because her mom was so nuts and such a stage mom and like forced her into doing all this and literally like forced her into anorexia, like crazy. And she talks a lot about Dan Schneider, but she just calls him the creator, which I was like, I wonder who that is. It took me like one Google to figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't think that Disney is going to have the same blowback because they have wrote the book on protecting their intellectual property and their branding. I mean, even back in the day, Family Guy would make fun of, like Walt Disney and say he was like a Nazi and all this shit, or he was anti-Semitic and racist. And this was probably, I mean, I don't know, maybe like 2009. And at that point, you could still Google it and find some of it, but you can't find it at all now. Like Disney's on it. So they're already shoring up all their NDAs. They're threatening people's lives and livelihoods. But I find it uplifting because it's just, now we don't have kids and we're not young enough to watch any of that. I mean, I personally I loved Even Stevens and Lizzie McGuire and
okay, yeah, that was your era, yeah.
But definitely, I lived and worked among people auditioning for the Amanda Show and What I Like About You and all that stuff because, in LA we were like 18 playing younger. Everybody,
right.
So it was a thing that in acting and in this business in LA that I worked around, that Brian Peck was like, oh, I had told Julie, like a well-known guy. He's like the kids acting coach. You'd go down into his basement. Yeah. And he was super creepy. And so having worked and auditioned among that, knowing people that worked on those shows, I think it's fucking awesome that this all came together and that people are speaking out and that just truly that even if Dan Schneider didn't ever physically touch anyone or harm anyone, the psychological and mental torture of the power dynamic that he created, whether it be in the writer's room or massaging people. I was just getting my whole damn life. I was like, I hope they all sue his ass. This isn't even enough for me. Because we went and watched the 20-minute interview that he did on his own channel.
Okay, yeah.
And it was
unwatchable. Pathetic. Cringe, set up, produced, canned. Like that poor guy who was doing the interviewing, who had been on Nickelodeon, clearly paid.
Oh, yeah.
Just horrific. Like, at least it definitely put a spotlight on how hard it is to be in those, on a set is like the ground floor, the ground level of how toxic and dominating those people in those positions can be. Because even with adults, it happens. Like, particularly with women, particularly, I mean, Me Too is basically just quiet on the set, just with adults. It's like what he did was sexual harassment of children, and then harassment in general and power harassment of everyone who was in any manner control of those children. So the entire ecosystem was affected. Like, and it's just unbelievable. And people look at it and go, I wouldn't have done that, and I wouldn't have, but you would have.
You would have.
Yeah.
You would have, Ranch. You would have. Because we all have, until you've reached a certain amount of time and level where you don't anymore. And that takes years.
Yeah. So we start off with the first episode. We get the background of Dan Schneider. He was on head of the class, and then he said he went to Harvard, but he didn't. So always when somebody lies about their schooling or whatever, you're like, let's just start there.
Yeah,
Really.
Let's start there.
This isn't a business that cares what college you went to.
Right.
That's the thing. You could have come from the gutter. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares where you went to school. They can pretend that they do, but they don't.
Yeah.
They don't care. Nobody cares.
I honestly feel like people are not going to be down with this take, but to me, it is as ridiculous and truly as much of a red flag as lying about being in or like family in 9/11.
Oh,
People who are like, my mom was in 9/11. It's like, and then you find out like, no.
Well, it makes no sense. Why lie about that?
Why? And it's verifiable.
Right.
You can find out you didn't go to that school, and also the whatever inside of you that needs to lie about that is so deeply insecure. It's not going to serve you on any job of any sort.
Yeah. We had a guy this past week, 90 Day. I don't know if you guys are watching Happily Ever After, but Sophie and Rob. And so Rob, Sophie's mom calls him Rob the Knob. She's very witty that way. And anyway, he's so good looking. He's so good looking you can hardly look at him. He's so good looking, but he's so insecure. And he said that this week because an ex-boyfriend of hers or ex-friend came in town to visit, who's just like an average looking British guy. And this is his wife he's talking about. And he was like, well, he came in and I was like, oh, no way. Like, hell no. Like, this guy's good looking. And I think right away, like he thinks he's better than me. I was like, what would make you think that? This complete stranger walks in the room and the first thing you think is he thinks he's better than me. Like, that is so deep insecurity. Like what you're saying, like you just can't even you can't get over it.
There's nowhere to go from there with this person.
Nowhere. And now we're dealing with somebody who's not only insecure. And excuse me, there's no way to say it, but he was the fat kid amongst in a society and in a business where that is, you will right away be the joke, the brunt of the joke. You are not hot. You are not seen as sexy. Every guy, you are going to be a joke. And so now that joke took all that on. We got years of being the joke, and now he's in power and he's going to fuck everyone around him.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he did. And for some reason, he's arrested development and he was taking out on little kids, mainly little girls. And which makes it.
He was doing it to the boys too.
That's true. But he
was making those boys wear penis costumes. That part, and I'm sure you're going to say Mary Payne, but like it was I think it was in episode 2 when it got to their dares they had to do on stage where they were basically
doing like the fear
fully
factor.
Torturing children.
Yeah.
Not volunteers who went on a game show to win $50,000.
Right.
Employed children in SAG who have no choice but to do what's in the script.
Yeah.
And the script is for them one kid to have peanut butter put all over him and dogs licking it off. And I was like damn near sobbing. I mean, I was trying not to. It was so triggering. Like, it was every single thing. Like, You're not in control of yourself. You're being humiliated in like a sexual way. You're being demeaned. You're on stage. Now it's a live audience, not even on set. I just can't even explain. Who knows what's in my subconscious or past life? That shit got me so hardcore, seeing that little boy have that happen to him. And then even the other kids, if they were just with spiders, but they were so terrified.
Yeah. Well, they picked the thing that would scare you the most, right? If somebody had said they're scared of spiders, like, well, then we're going to put her in a bathtub with spiders and worms. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, exactly. And who even thinks kids that would be entertaining for children to do Fear Factor? We can barely watch it with adults.
No.
And now you're going to make kids who have no, like I don't even know what it would be, like no frame of reference for what is like irrational fear. Everything's irrational fear for a kid. And now you've got spiders and a dog licking peanut butter off you, and there's network executives at Nickelodeon who think that that's entertaining. I mean,
it's beyond. And
it's beyond.
And as far as you're saying, like, you know, he says he was always cast as the fat guy. So he was out to show people, I'm not the fat guy. I'm a really talented writer. So I went to Harvard, which he didn't. And then that's how he got the job to produce and write all that, which was like an SNL for kids. And even when they're showing like Amanda Bynes and some of these other girls doing these like stand-up, right? Julie as a stand-up, I can imagine you were like, what? This joke about, look at this. This is disgusting. Look how flat I am. And they're like 9 years old.
Yeah. And I can't imagine that. I mean, now I can only speak for myself. So I don't know. I mean, when I started stand-up as a kid, I was 14 when I started doing stand-up. And I think, and I just wasn't in a sexual or being sexualized in any way. So I don't know, maybe for a girl that's more girly, it's on her mind, because it would be, I don't know, but I can only speak for myself, but yeah, or at least, and then judge what that would be. But I think that's a lot of that is planted.
Yeah, I don't think this little, like a 9-year-old's writing a joke about, but look how disgusting it is because I'm so flat.
Yeah, I just don't,
you know?
I don't know. I mean, I guess you could, I mean, I'm thinking, but it's like, as a stand-up, as a kid, what did I talk about? I talked about riding in the back seat of a station wagon. Mm-hmm. I talked about math class. I talked about boogers. I talked about like my brother and sister being annoying. Like, I wasn't worried about my side tits. Like, so I don't know.
You had them.
Yeah, but not that I didn't have them, but I also just wasn't a girly girl too. So I don't know, maybe girls start to experience the like acknowledgement of that when they're younger, when they're seen as pretty. I don't know.
I guess my view would be like, don't talk about it. Like, don't talk about, like, try to hide it. Like, I don't, you know, if I'm that young and I've got boobs, I definitely don't want anybody to notice it. You know?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like, look at my tiny titties that are mostly nipples, right? It's crazy. Like, we just wouldn't.
That's I mean, it's so gross. So somebody's writing these jokes, I think. So we meet right away. We meet Scotchy Cool and Kate Taylor. So Scotchy Cool is a business. She's a culture writer and she writes for BuzzFeed Canada. Actually, I just looked her up just now. And then Kate Taylor is a journalist for Business Insider. Nobody's name has ever fit them better than Kate Taylor's name fits her. When they showed her, I go, I could have named that as Kate Taylor. That's exactly what she looks like. But they were both great. And we talk about Dan helping to launch many of these big names. Like you look at Kenan and Kel. I mean, Kenan Thompson, the longest running person ever on SNL. And then we get some of these cast members from all that. We have Leon, we have Katrina, and then Leon starts talking about the leotards made him feel most uncomfortable because he's like 12, 13. He's like, I'm already like, it's weird because I'm like in my body and you're all weird. And they would put him in a leotard like every time. He talks about the noseboy outfit and then one of the first, excuse my language, cum shot jokes for children. Like he sneezes and it's like the thing goes all over the teacher's face. Like, and then we see this over and over and over.
The bodysuit looks like it's covered in penises when it's supposed to be like
a nose,
big noses or something.
Yeah.
And that was just the beginning of what basically apparently is Dan Schneider's legacy, which is cum shots over and over and over and over and over again, which is astounding.
And they, you know, and they didn't know what it was, but they knew the adults thought it was funny. So they're like, all right, I guess this is funny.
And they said that some of the people watching, like whether it was crew or whatever, I don't know which part it was. One of the girls was like regaling one of those stories with Jamie Lynn Spears when she got her cum shot.
Yeah.
And one of the crew guys, because they did it and they spurted it was like a thing in a plastic tube candy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they did it. They put it in the camera, and then she overheard a guy be like, "Jesus Christ, that's a
no." They were laughing. Like,
that's a cum shot, right?
Yeah.
Like, she didn't know what it meant.
No, of course they didn't know what that meant. I mean, you know, so and then Katrina, she's the blonde girl that we kind of meet at the beginning, who's Amanda Bynes-esque. She says, you know, she was told after being on the show for a couple seasons that she needed to lose weight because she wasn't the fat one. They already had a fat one, and so she needed to lose weight so she wouldn't be the fat one. And she was like, I hit puberty. Like my mom's like, she dances 3-4 hours a day. So no, that's the way she is. And then she was edged out by a younger Katrina, which was Amanda Bynes. So
all of that it culminates in the last episode, but I think it's just really strange being in the business, being actors. Julie and I have both been in this since we're 15. I just said this earlier today, but it's just weird to see coming out from an insider perspective. I mean, I lived in Tokyo when I was 15 and was doing modeling and stuff. And I know that my mom was not going to tell me not to do anything that I didn't want to do. And that most importantly, I wanted to work and I wanted to get cast and I get the job and do it. And there was like a dynamic that happened, I think probably with many of them, but certainly with the gentleman that's in the last episode with his mom, where he got fired. And of course they were all traumatized beyond like probably physical recognition when they were all fired, because it's no matter what age you are, that's absolutely traumatizing. But
yeah,
he blamed his mom because his mom was loud and very vocal about protecting him. And I just really felt for them. I felt for every parent that now looks back and says, was I too permissive? They would have been blamed if their kid got fired, and then they'll be blamed because their kid's jerking off a potato. There's no way to win, because I guarantee Ariana Grande wanted that job. I've met Ariana Grande's mom. She's lovely. And we know Frankie. I think if they're too protective of you and now they're difficult and now you're fired.
Yeah. Right.
It's so screwed up. It's just
because they can find another one just like you, because there's 60 kids that want that one job, you know? So yeah, of course they can just find another one. Like this Katrina says, she was just replaced by someone who looked just like her, Amanda Bynes, who was just younger. Yeah. And Dan took like a real liking to Amanda Bynes. And we see, you know, Amanda Bynes. And the first time I ever saw Amanda Bynes, again, is because I'm older, was Hairspray. It was the musical, right? But it was the movie.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the first time I ever saw her. She was so great. But I didn't realize she had been the star before, because like I said, my kids just didn't hit that Nickelodeon age exactly. Or at that point I was so like, go watch TV and I don't care. Like I'm so tired. Go watch these like cum shot jokes. Aren't they funny, kids? But he said that the journalist Scatchy says that Amanda Bynes was like a new deviation of what was coming up with this Dan Schneider. She wasn't like Mary-Kate and Ashley, or like Shirley Temple, innocent and cute, but she wasn't quite hypersexual like Miley Cyrus had started to get, or they show Brooke Shields from the Blue Lagoon, which is she's like 14 fucking her brother, and we thought that movie was fine. And so it's interesting, right? Because she was not quite the Mary-Kate Ashley. Can you even believe those two skated out of it being like,
that's all because of that dad?
Yeah, I mean, like, they're just.
He produced all of their dual star stuff. So luckily, even though they probably, I feel like they don't even like that dad, and no one does. But meanwhile, all of the rest of us are like, well, I'd love for him to exploit me and make me a gazillionaire. But because it was their dad, he wasn't. All he cared about was churning it out, making the money, and he worked them to death. Yeah. But he certainly wasn't doing anything nefarious like that, because it was their dad. That's why all those shows suck too.
Yeah, right. Videos. And then it's interesting though, because it is Amanda Bynes, I guess, was sort of in the middle, right? Because she's sort of that tween, and she's very pretty, but she's not totally innocent. Now they're starting to do them in the bikinis and stuff. And now we get these female writers, which you guys also are writers. So I can't wait to hear your opinion on this. We get Christy Stratton and Jenny Kilgan. Christy reminds me of a younger, or maybe a less Botox Lisa Rinna. Christy reminded me of. And then Jenny is the one who later files the lawsuit. But they had to hire a woman. So Jenny tells us that she was just like, doing temp. They were both doing temp jobs, and Jenny's a script she did got picked. So she was so excited. She's in the writer's room. This is all she's ever wanted. She quits her regular job. Then she finds out Christy's coming on and they're going to split a salary. And they were like, it was such a huge deal to get a writing job. So we just didn't even complain about it. And then Dan was like, women can't be funny. Do you mind if I just call you the girls? And they were like, okay. And they were like, good. Thank God you're not so uptight about it. So then they knew from this point forward, like, we split a salary. We don't talk. It's fine to call us the girls. I mean, then he was telling about sometimes they would just be on their computers probably when first, like, IM was coming up, AOL or whatever.
Yep.
It would pop up and it would be like, yell out, I'm a slut. And then he would get in trouble if you didn't do it.
Yeah.
He would challenge them to like eat ice cream and then not pay them. Like, can you maybe you can't imagine. I can't imagine.
Yeah, we can.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine being in scenarios with a showrunner, let's say, on a show where I wanted to
don't say anything specific,
kill him, but was held back from doing so.
We were very triggered back into Jeff Lewis, just in terms of a toxic environment where someone's yelling at you. But we were going back over a decade into writer's room where I'm like feeling like I have to, like, somebody has like beef jerky in his mouth and I have to bite, or a cookie, and I have to bite the other end of it while it's in his mouth. And Julie's like, steam's coming out of her ears. And she's like, why did you do that? And we're like getting into things. I'm like, I feel like I fucking have to, like, what am I going to do? And it like, I'm talking about years and years of Julie and I like, therapy and shit over like, you don't understand what it's like being, a certain way on a set, and these dudes, and like, and he was our direct boss. And I just felt,
there's so much gaslighting too. And Dan Schneider, what that was talk about, when that brought me back too, what this guy did, and multiple guys, and Brandy's experienced it more than me in a sexual harassment way. Obviously, I've not been sexually harassed. I've been trying to be dominated and scared and power played and all of that stuff. And certainly the thing where we were together, it was hard because I wanted to kill him and I couldn't. So that person, however, similar to Dan Schneider, is giving you a gaslighting, insecure, overly confident demeanor of someone who also demands that person flirt back. And that is the struggle and the hellhole that every almost woman has to experience while working on a set. If you're if a man finds you attractive. Now, luckily,
many jobs, not just
many jobs in a corporate environment or whatever. If a man in power finds a woman attractive in any way, and he's a scumbag, he will now use that power to force her to flirt with him. And that is the burden and the horrificness, and that's #me too and all that stuff. That's what that's all about. How many women have felt like they've had to flirt back with some piece of shit because she didn't want to lose her job? It's
and since these are like comedy writers, right? They're in a comedy writing room, and Christy was the one who was saying, well, Jenny tells the story and then Christy retells it, that she was telling a joke about something happened to her in high school to, like, use for a plot line. And he says, okay, so while you're telling it, lean over the desk and act like somebody's like sodomizing you. And she's like, why would that make the story funny? It just will. Just do it. It's funny. Like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you think that's funny? It's funny.
Right. And on top of that, now you're in a comedy setting and you have to act like all that's funny. So not only do you have to deal with it, let's say in general, which is the flirting. Now I'm going to make you laugh like we're having fun while I harass you.
Yeah.
Like, it's beyond.
And I would add just because we were comedy writers as well. It wasn't even just like, oh, if I don't do this, we'll get fired, or we won't get to come back for the next season, or we won't get to come back after hiatus, or any little thing or we won't get to work on the live show portion of this or whatever. There's all these always extra elements, especially we're not in the WGA, we're not in the writers union. So, but mainly the thing is, it's like, if you don't play along, it's like you're pissing into the Cheerios. You're fucking the atmosphere for everyone around. Now it's awkward. Daddy slapped mommy at the dinner table.
You're no fun.
Yeah, you're no
fun. You're not even funny.
No one can laugh now. And so you're just trying to go with it and just keep it moving to keep the energy up, because you're always trying to, it's really gross.
It's insidious. It's disgusting. That's like, and now we're dealing with kids who don't know from anything. But like these two women in the writer's room, like the level, just even being told, like the way that the writer's room is already gross. It's already a competitive, disgusting cesspool of people who are actually not working together, but are individual underminers and solo comedians who are trying to get their jokes in. So they're also undermining you. Like, that's all you two, like, it's just, it's an awful, now some writer's room might be different or whatever, but clearly that's what he had set up. And that's sort of, I would say, a pretty standard writing room environment. And now you're the only two women there, and your whole purpose is to basically entertain the men in the room for their sexual gratification. Like, I felt for them hardcore, and I want to go find all of them and burn their dicks off. I mean, I can't take it.
There was two things that really got me. So there was something they said about porn. Mary Payne, it was like, I don't know if she walked into Dan's office and he had porn on, and then he just kept it on,
like as a joke.
That I couldn't deal with. And then when I don't know if she said something to him or whatever it was, and it was the end of the season and she was fired before she made it back to her car from her agent's office.
Yeah.
It's just with zero, and with just, there's just no ramifications, no consequences, no nothing. All of the burden of keeping that job was on those two women, keeping their mouths. Yeah.
And also, you're only a half a person. You only get paid as a half a person. They said they brought in a new writer, a male that had never written on a show or had zero experience, and he got paid a full salary. But these two women with experience got paid half a salary. So he's getting worse and worse. Now we've got Drake Bell on the show. We've got Amanda Bynes. We've got these new stars coming up. And, they're talking about how Virgil is a guy. Let's see, what was Virgil? He was a director on the Amanda show. And then we have Karen, who's an editor, and she was an editor on all that and the Amanda show. And they're talking about now he's just yelling at everybody. Within one day, he was so fun. And they'd be like, oh man, I felt bad that I misjudged him. But then the same day he would tear you down. You'd be like, well, shit. And Christy got fired because she did two personal things on her own time during the season. She went to a wedding and then went to a funeral, but it was on her own time on the weekend. She was not working, but she got fired because she did two personal things, because you were not allowed to do anything personal when the season was shooting. She got fired for that. And then Jenny was told he could pay her full salary for 16 weeks.
Right.
But she was going to work for 27 weeks. So she was like, oh, okay, I'll take it. And she took it. But then she left. This was season 2, I think, of the Amanda show. She left after 4 days. Because she just she would walk into, they would have a meeting of only the men writers. And they'd say, are you coming to the meeting? And she's like, what meeting? And then they would call her in after they were done with the meeting and then make fun of her in front of the whole room. And so she quit. And then Jenny calls Christy and says, I'm going to sue Dan. Do you want to do it with me? And she's like, kinda, but they're all scared of him. So Jenny's lawyer, this is so far way before any of this happens. Jenny's lawyer files complaints about gender inequality in a hostile work environment. She got a settlement, but she knew, I'm getting this settlement, but now it's the end of my career because nobody will hire me. And she assumed with this against Dan that it would stop, but we're only in episode 1 and it didn't stop. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And I do want to know what these two women are doing now, Christy and Jenny.
That's I hope they're working.
I hope they are too. I mean,
I know that the Lisa Rinna one is definitely still writing.
Yeah. I mean, Jenny, oh God. So now we go into episode 2 and we meet this woman named MJ. and she is a young actress's mom. The actress name is Brandy. We never see Brandy. We just see pictures of her when she's young, so we don't know what she looks like now. And we know it's not you because it's with an I. But Brandy with an I got a small role when she was 11 on the Amanda Show. This is all she ever wanted. She was one of those Hollywood kids. She was trying. She finally gets a small role on the Amanda Show. And she was like, parents were not allowed on the set. We would just sit in like a green room or whatever. But all the kids had this handler, this great guy. His name was Jason Handy.
You can't even do it in like central cast. If you saw it in a script, you'd go, don't name the pedophile Jason Handy.
Yeah.
I mean, I forgot to even mention the whole part on the Amanda Show where they wrote a part called Penelope Taint, and that the execs were like, is that like? And they're like, no, like she's tainted. Oh, okay. I mean, okay. So anyway, Jason Handy, she says, after she was done with one of her little roles, Jason wanted to email all the kids to like tell the kids what, I'd like to email with your 11-year-old. Is that cool? I'm 36. That's weird? No, it's not weird. So he wanted to just email with the kids and, keep them up to date on what was going on. And Brandy's mom said she was happy to have a friend in the industry. She thought it was great. He could like tell her when there were parts. And then Jason sent Brandy, who was 11 or 12 years old, a nude where he was masturbating and said, I'm thinking of you. To an 11 or a 12-year-old. And she said she like unplugged the computer, ran up to her room, and mom looked and saw what it was and was horrified and struggled with calling the police, but then she didn't. And again, not the mom's fault. She didn't know what to do.
Oh, no.
And she knew that her daughter would never speak to this creepo again. And then she was like, this was my kid's like dream. And she was having so much fun doing it, but she never acted, never danced, nothing ever again. Because this guy. God.
And quite frankly, if she had called the police, nothing would have happened to that guy. And it might not even have ended up when he did get caught. One of the things that got him caught was that the presence of that photograph on his computer much later.
Yeah.
I just know in my heart, nothing would have happened to him. Nothing would happen to him if she had called the police. It's what she's going to call the Van Nuys PD, the LAPD.
Right.
They didn't care. Even you'll get to it, but even Brian Peck, I mean, these people get a year in prison.
Yeah. It's like nothing.
Nothing. And then
it's
nobody
like nothing.
checks if they're a registered sex offender or not.
But I mean, also this guy could just be like, oh, I thought I was sending it to the mom. We had a relationship. And the police would be like, that makes sense, because definitely people just want those kind of pictures. I mean, who doesn't think it's hot? So, so now we're getting more clips of Amanda Bynes and how now she's kind of pivoted past Nickelodeon. So Dan created this show, What I Like About You, for the WB with Amanda as the star. Now, did you guys know? I mean, I've heard of this show, but again, it's just not like at this time I was like having kids and I just wasn't paying attention to this.
That by the time What I Like About You came on, it's like was big in like the audition circuit, and it was big in LA.
It was. Okay. So
he was like the next like fucking SNL. I mean, Amanda Bynes was set up in LA to be like this crazy, comedic actor kid with physical comedy. She could do it all. She was like the best like kid comedian to come along ever. So and especially as a girl, because that's the thing that, of course, Dan Schneider, he had Keenan and Kelly and these boys that he took, but for her to rise as a girl was a big deal in LA.
Yeah. So, Dan was doing this show with Will Calhoun, who I guess was a writer or something for Friends. He was with Friends. So, I mean, that's a big show. And Dan is fighting a lot with Will. So he finally gets pushed out of the writer's room. They're like, get the fuck out of here. But he's still a producer. And he's very close with Amanda. And they show that, the massaging and the hot tubs and the, all this stuff, Now, Amanda has started dating an older guy. She's not getting along with her parents. She tries to run away from home. She turns to Dan for help. Now, police were involved. I think she's like 14, 15 at this point. So now Amanda wants to be emancipated because she wants to work longer hours and make more money. It went to court and failed. She didn't get emancipated from her parents. But Dan was very involved in this plan and helped her do it. And now Amanda's parents are like, well, fuck this guy. So it's the end of the relationship between Dan Schneider and Amanda, and he leaves What I Like About You. But now we see what we see in real time is the breakdown of her relationship with her parents, right?
Yeah. And he just wanted her to get emancipated so he could work her longer hours.
Yeah. All right. It wasn't like he was going to set her up in an apartment or something.
Care less, because her dad wouldn't be there negotiating the deals. He wouldn't have to deal with the dad, who was very, very, I guess, controlling and like her manager.
Though you do wonder if Dan Schneider thought Amanda Bynes would be his girlfriend. I mean, I think that
probably
Schneider is a latent pedophile.
Yeah.
And meaning that I don't know that he's ever acted on it, but he's, I think from everything we can see from his shows, that he's desires it.
He's priming it. He's grooming it.
Grooming it, desires it, but he might be too insecure to follow through. I'm not sure. But
yeah.
Maybe he was, you know, he thought that with Amanda Bynes, that could really happen for him because she was going to be emancipated. But
yeah, he was very, very close with her.
Yeah.
So now, because he has to leave What I Like About You with the WB, where he thought he was going to be able to break out of this kid stuff, he has to go back to Nickelodeon. So he revives all that, the SNL for kids. And he's super powerful there. They show clips of sketches of all the kids calling him God. And he's working his way into the sketches like, oh gosh, we don't want to piss off Dan. You know, they wouldn't say piss off. We don't want to, like Dan. And they talk about him a lot. And he shows up on the set like, why are you kids talking about me? Like he's starting to put himself in to show how powerful he is. And now we meet these two go throughout the whole thing, and they come back in episode 5, which is Giovanni and Brian. So Giovanni was a cast member. She says she was the token black girl, and Brian, he felt he was the token black guy. They were both on seasons 7 and 8. And Brian felt like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to break out. And these are his words. He says, I felt like if I did this, I could get my family out of the hood. His mom is Tracy. She's there. She's vocal. She's very involved in his career. And then we meet another
earlier. That's that I was talking about earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. And their story is heartbreaking. But they're saying like, you know, we're both so happy. And you look around, you see all the cast photos, and they are the only 2 black people. You know, and maybe that was just like these kids don't want to do anything wrong because there's 20 more kids that want to, if there's 60 that want to be in the white role, there's 400 that want to be in the black role because they're not casting very many, black or people of color at all. So they said, you know, the set was dysfunctional. They were constantly having the kids do overtime. And that's when Brian's like looking over at his mom's like, you know, this shit's illegal. Like, you know, I've already worked 12 hours today or whatever. But they all did it because nobody wanted to say no. And Tracy and Brian, mom and son, talk about the racial undertones of everything going on there. And they felt very uncomfortable. And this is when they start to talk about on-air dare, which is like the fear factor. And when I tell you, that's all I wrote down because I couldn't write anything else. I was like, they're making a kid like put a live scorpion in his mouth and like close his lips around it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what happened with the kid with the peanut butter. And he was so scared of the dog.
I think that was Brian.
And okay, well then.
That's what I thought. I'm not sure though, but.
I think it was Brian.
Yeah.
And what you're basically getting at is besides the sexual harassment, which is pervasive through all of it, it's the white nationalism of it all too. Like the cliches and Dan Schneider was like a Nazi, like a full, I mean, I'm sorry, making these kids have to do cliche things racially or sexually or whatever to demean them in every single way. But you know who didn't seem to get demeaned were the white boys.
Mm-hmm.
So, or at least the ones that he didn't consider nerds, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like he wanted so badly to be the hot white football player and made everyone else suffer around him who he deemed as less than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, I'm going to assume that would be anyone who wasn't white.
Yeah.
It certainly showed on the shows.
They said that, you know, he's getting worse. He's getting more, you know, is a total egomaniac. And Karen, who's the editor, worked on all 3 shows. She worked on all that. They made a show, Drake and Josh. And she says it was so much pressure. There was no eating. There was no going to the bathroom, you know, in the editing bay. She would get up and he'd be like, where are you going? She's like, oh, like I felt like I couldn't eat because then I couldn't go to the bathroom. And she says, Dan promised her a job and then didn't give it to her after she's worked for him all these years on all these shows with Nickelodeon. And he gave the job to a younger man with like no experience. And she says, I got up after that and I left and I never looked back. You know, it was all him. It wasn't like Nickelodeon as a whole. It was him specifically. And Virgil, who was the director of 2 of these shows, says he considered Dan a friend. and he was going through like a divorce and something serious in his life. He was having a bad day. He'd worked for this guy for like 8-9 years. And one day he was having a bad day and Dan got mad, and Dan had an assistant come over and tell him he could just go for the day, and he was fired. And he said, if Dan was to fire me, I've known him for 8-10 years, whatever, he could come over and talk to me himself. He said, I considered him my friend. And Dan wouldn't come over and talk to him in his face. Had this assistant do it.
Lame. Lame,
I mean,
lame, coward, lame, fat ass coward, lame, coward, lame, pedophile coward. Like that's my opinion.
Yeah. It's awful.
Whatever. That's my personal opinion. That's what I think he is. So yeah, your friend of however long, you can't just tell him that's a whole other thing. Like that's the work environment. The work environment of I'm too scared to go eat. Like I think that we've experienced this on sets too, where it's like we are not performing brain surgery. We are not actually saving puppies' lives. We are doing a TV show, which we all do because we don't actually like to do work
or have skills.
What we like to do is have fun and have fun with other people who like to have fun and do funny things. That's why we're all in this business. So to create an environment where you've taken all the fun and all the joy and all the reasons why we're there out of it and created a toxic, hostile, fear-based, fear-mongering, undermining, ridiculous, overinflated ego for yourself. We're in a church of you?
Yeah.
Like some sort of worship situation of you? Like, no, Dan.
No, Dan.
No, Dan.
No, Dan. You're not.
I will not be ignored,
I will not be ignored, Dan.
Will not be ignored, Dan. You guys, I don't know if I've ever sent you guys that meme, but I send it to somebody in my family or in my circle once a week. If they don't write me back fast enough on the text, I'm like, "That's what you're getting. You're getting Glenn Close,
Dan."
Be ignored, Dan. So then we get the segment that we talked about earlier about Brian not being invited back for the next season on all that. And he said he was crying. He didn't even get to say goodbye to his friends. And he was worried. And his mom was also like, oh my God, like, am I the reason? Because I was out here like, this isn't fair. And she was always standing up for her kids. She was doing exactly what any mother, even if they didn't do it, they wanted to do it. Right. And she always felt so guilty. Like, I got him fired from that job because of my big mouth. And she said that day she felt his whole soul, his everything shift. He was like 13 years old, started pulling away from her. It changed their relationship forever. We later find out forever until now he's in his 30s. And he's like, yeah, I'm still in therapy over it. I'm still in therapy over that was taken away from me. I feel like it ruined my life. I thought like I was going to be able to save my family. And now I'm not going to be able to. And it's my mom's fault. And I never got to say goodbye to all my friends. Like it's like if your parents picked you up in the middle of the night and said you have to move schools or move to another country. Like it's so devastating. And she said, Tracy says it's so sorry because it, ruined their relationship, but she did end up saving him from a house of horrors that she didn't really know until now how bad it was.
And I do think it's important if it's not a lesson moving forward for parents of children who do. Acting is one of the, I think, right hand in hand along with your dream and your craft and having fun and all that stuff. You have to instill in them, as is we all should have been instilled even in college, with the jobs are going to end. They could end abruptly. These things are unstable. They have to have an understanding, or else the trauma is going to be so much more lifelong than it's already going to be traumatic.
Yeah.
So I do think that in every aspect of a performer's life from very, very early on,
not even just performing, any child who is working or in any way, maybe you're performing tennis, performing ice skating, gymnastics. Right. 1, you're probably going to get molested. 2, you're also going to lose a lot. And you're going to
lose a lot. Yeah.
Kids are going to be better than you. And it's not going to be mommy's fault because mommy told your coach, shut the fuck up.
Right. I think this kind of comes up a lot where these kids had no grasp that it could be taken away. Like they thought, oh, now I'm all of that on Nickelodeon. Okay, well now I'm Angelina Jolie in 10 years. Like they didn't grasp that it could be taken away.
Right.
But now in the documentary is where we turn to Jason Handy. MJ, Brandy's mom, gets the call from the LAPD about Jason Handy, and we find out he's been arrested on 11 counts of child pornography, videos and things. He has plastic baggies with kids' names on them with tokens. Some were like 7-year-old girls' underwear. Her daughter was included in this, which was like a handwritten note her daughter had written to him. Plastic bags with each, like a serial killer, like for
Like
real.
Yeah.
He was one step before he was going to take somebody's life.
Yeah.
For sure.
He will now.
For sure. And she said, LAPD said to her, like, a lot of the parents aren't allowing the kids to talk. Like, they're telling their side, but the kids aren't talking. And she said she would allow Brandy to tell the LAPD about him. And she hoped that it would get, justice for these kids. And now we see some of Jason's writings, which it went by on the screen quickly. And in my normal, if I'm doing 90 Day Fiance or something, I'm screenshotting that shit and I didn't want to see it. Because he is saying he's struggling every day with his pedophilia. He's looking for a young girl to rape. This is what he says. So he is going to go to killing. I mean, he is.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. Because there's not going to be any way
to satisfy this.
From what we know from our true crime, whatever, the obsession's going to take over. He's going to do the rape, and then he's going to have guilt, and the guilt is going to cause the murder.
Yeah.
Or that weird, whatever it is that they end up killing them because they can't live with it, blah, 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 and then keep doing it or whatever. But It's
And this sweet little girl, Brandy, who probably now is like 13, 14, she testifies in court. And there was another girl that testified as well. And she was only 9 when Jason Handy came to her house and was playing video games with her.
9. I don't know how a parent doesn't.
I agree.
Honest to God, Mary Payne, I don't have kids. The rage I feel just thinking about it in general, I don't know how a parent doesn't go and kill him. I don't know. I don't know how you have the control. To not go do that. I have to give it to these parents.
We haven't gotten to it yet, but with Drake and Brian Peck, because Drake has the best dad on the planet.
Yeah, he does.
I mean,
sure does.
He won the dad lottery with that guy. And I am surprised that guy hasn't gotten on his Harley, driven on down to Van Nuys, to where we can all just Google where Brian Peck lives, who's completely been out of prison and working on other kids' shows. Like,
how? That is control. That is someone's inner. I don't even know. I don't know. Because I know there's a way to get that shit done and to not be responsible for it. So I don't know what we're doing that we're not handling these things. But
but I think about, if my 9-year-old daughter and some 36-year-old man came in and was like, oh, I'll just go with her down in you guys' basement. We'll play video games or whatever. I'm like, what? Why do you want to do that? The adults are up here drinking. Like, what's happening? Like, what are you doing? So he grabbed her and tried to kiss her. And then he was telling her, I can get you on other shows. And I guess that girl was 9 when this happened and started the ball rolling. So he was sentenced to 6 years. So it was, I don't exactly got the exact year what that was, but 6 years, I think maybe he's out. Jason Handy. We need to look him up.
I think he's definitely out.
Jen Shaw is in prison longer than Jason Handy and Brian Peck, or whatever his name is. Jen Shaw.
Yeah.
I'm not saying what she did was right, but she didn't fuck a child.
Right. Yeah.
Or try to. So there's something wrong.
Well, but I tell you, Teresa and Joe served longer than Brian Peck.
Yeah. What? And for fraudulent financial papers, Juicy Joe got deported.
Right.
Lives in another country for doing the financial thing. Not stealing people's. Not grooming children. Not grooming children, nor having sex with them.
Yeah.
But here we are. What is going on?
Brandy's mother, MJ, says everything was swept under the rug. She never got an apology. He was sentenced to 6 years in her mind, So now it's 4 months. 4 months after Jason was sentenced in 2003. So yeah, he's been out. Another member of the same crew of the same TV show was arrested. It's Brian Peck. He's known as Pickle Boy.
Ugh.
He walks around with a big plate of pickles and sticks them through holes makes people eat them. Okay. Yeah, he's a cog in the damn machine. He's an acting and dialogue coach. Everybody loved him. He's funny. He's clever. The parents loved him. They trusted him. But then the parents talk about Brian's weird house. They say he had, very much to me, trying to lure kids in, right? It's like, look at all my Marvel collection, look at all these cool things about Spider-Man.
Right.
And then in his garage, he had this collection of clown paintings, and he had a John Wayne Gacy painting and correspondence. Serial killer of young boys, John Wayne Gacy.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. He is
believed.
It is not to be believed. It is not to be
living
believed.
in Van Nuys.
It is not to be believed. It is
Yes.
just not to be believed. He is the Hansel and Gretel witch in full view for everyone to see. Parents walking through the house, fine. Just I don't. It makes it. There's no words. There's no words.
And then soon thereafter, the kids are everybody at a table read, and the parents are in the room, and the parents are asked to leave the room. And when the parents leave the room, these other adults who the kids are saying, the kids now as adults are saying, we didn't know who these other adults were. I guess they were FBI or LAPD, or maybe they were network executives, came in the room and said, we just wanted to let you know that, Mr. Peck, again, Peck, you can't write it. Jason Handy, Brian Peck, Pickle Boy. He has been arrested for, inappropriately touching a child actor, and he won't be around anymore. No more details were given. And Virgil.
That was my other scene that was like super triggering for me, that they were called in. It was either Dan Schneider and the network execs, but it was the people who run the show and then a Nickelodeon executive. So it was basically all their bosses. They were all brought in collectively, not in one-on-one. And what definitely wasn't law enforcement. It was their bosses.
Okay.
And told as a group that Brian Peck had, been arrested for, whatever illegal conduct with a child. And does anyone want to raise their hand?
Right.
Has anything happened to any of you? And then now you're sitting in a group of, 30 kids, and you're looking around and at your bosses, and you're just not going to be the squeaky wheel. You're not going to rock the boat. Also, that's embarrassing.
Of course.
They didn't make any effort at all to truly find out if any other kid had been harmed or damaged in any way. They didn't want to know, and they made it clear that they didn't want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And Virgil and Brian, so Virgil was the director, and then Brian and Genevieve are the kids. And they say they had no idea who it happened to at that time or what. They had no idea. And then we see Drake Bell come forward. Now it's interesting, okay, because my daughter is 21. So this, right when Drake Bell comes on, he sits down, and my daughter walks through the room and goes, ew, why is he on the TV? And I said, this is this, terrible Quiet on the Set documentary about these kids and all that, Victorious and all these shows that were on when you were a kid. And she goes, well, Drake Bell, she goes through this whole thing about what she knows about him, right? She was like, well, he's like a abuser of his girlfriend, and he like inappropriately texted some girls. I said, well, what we're about to find out is he was horribly molested himself. And that's really I'm telling her, this is a lot of time what happens, abused kids will abuse. And, I said, I'm not excusing it. I don't know what he did. I haven't gotten there yet. I've never seen this person in my life. I said, I don't know what he did. I said, but I'm telling you, he's been through something terrible. So whatever he did probably is a result of his childhood. And she's just like, ooh, he's hiding in Mexico, and leaves the room. So it's interesting that she knows that part of the story, but she doesn't know this part of the story.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they did definitely keep his other shit on the down low in the documentary, which I did think was a little, I didn't think
he just said like, oh, he's had some problems.
I would have appreciated had they, not to take away from his experience and everything he went through, but I thought it would have been a more important message and an understanding had we sort of been able to all be honest and know that he went and then was an abuser.
Yeah, because this is learned behavior, right?
Yeah,
and he's trying to get better,
Right.
Yeah. And he was an addict at that time. I don't know that he would still continue like a cycle of abuse now that he's sober, however long he's sober.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. This is a side piece of we had already, I knew all that stuff about Drake Bell anyways. Julie and I knew about Drake and Josh. We wrote a script, like our first script. We wanted the other one, Josh, to be in our movie.
Mhm.
Back when we had dreams and stuff. And but we did this other research, and apparently Dan Schneider and Brian Peck had comedy camp where all of the kids that would be cast would go to like Dan's house or Brian's house with a pool. No parents were allowed. And they would put them through like comedy boot camp, and they'd have pool parties and do all this stuff without any parents present. And I just thought it was funny because in the scene, you know, nobody at Nickelodeon in the big meeting with all the kids and the execs, no one knows that he's a minor, so his name has not been disclosed. Only Brian Peck. But Dan Schneider figured it out quite easily and called up Drake and was like, listen, you know, I hope I was, you know, was it Brian Peck? And Drake's like, yeah, it was me. And it was Brian Peck. Because the dad would see him all the time touching inappropriately, is holding on too long. You see him in the photo with Leo DiCaprio, like touching each other.
So gross.
Like, we're not blind. And then no one at Nickelodeon you can't put 2 and 2 together. No, I'm quite sure you can.
Yeah, I'm sure. And they just don't want to know. They just don't want to talk about it. So like, oh, well, the name hasn't been disclosed. So we don't know who it is. Let's keep it pushing.
Yeah.
So Drake Bell says he's never told this story publicly. He started acting when he was 5. And this is where we meet his dad, Joe, the hero. And Drake Bell got on the Amanda show when he was 12. And this was his dream because he was like a singer, an actor. And you know, I think some of these kids, like if you read Jeanette McCurdy's books, was really pushed into it and was kind of like, I mean, it's fine. I like to do ballet, but all right. Kind of pushed because the mom saw like, oh, we can make money. This kid can make me money. But Drake Bell really was sort of the one driving this train. Like he always wanted to do it. He was, you know, talented in a lot of ways. And so he got on that show when he was 12, which was his dream. And now we had these new studios, Nickelodeon on Sunset, which was Dan Schneider's, you know, big to do. And Drake says everybody got along with Brian Peck. He knew so much about the history of Hollywood. He was so interesting to be around. So he was going to be Drake's acting coach. And Dad Joe's like, I was always in eye distance. Always. I was in anything that was going on. I was always in the eye distance. And Joe says, you know, a lot of the parents were seen and not heard, but I was always around. I was always watching. And I thought Brian was hanging around my son a little too much, and it didn't sit well with me. I didn't like the way he would touch my kid. And I've seen videos because Brian's, you know, big claim to fame was he coached Leonardo DiCaprio and all these other famous people. That's how great he is. But when I saw the videos with him and Leo, he's touching Leonardo DiCaprio the same way he's touching my kid. It's not right. It doesn't sit with me. I don't like it.
And we all saw that in the video. When I saw that video of him with Leonardo DiCaprio, I was like, oh my good God.
Yeah.
It was.
And then what's even worse, which to me is kind of like, because I don't even know, and this probably was like, I don't even know, 2004 or 5 or something, or maybe 2010. The fact that, no, he would have been much younger. I don't know. Maybe it's 2008. The fact that he would go to whoever and be like, I'm slightly uncomfortable with this acting coach.
Yeah.
Then they're going to tell him he's fucking homophobic. Well,
right.
Gay, and now you're being accused of being homophobic. He's like, I don't care if he's a man or a woman. I want his hands off my fucking kid.
Yeah.
Also, he's bugging around, hanging around too much. I mean, now that is some gaslighting right there.
That is
exactly what will happen on a set.
He said, you don't understand how it is because you're homophobic, because gay men are just touchy and feely, and that's you're homophobic if you don't understand that. And he was like, I kept saying it and I kept telling them, and I got ostracized, so I backed off, but I kept an eye on it. And Drake was like, I thought nothing about it because I was 13 years old or whatever. He goes, but my dad saw it a mile away.
Yep.
And you know, so now we're working on the Drake and Josh show, the spinoff, and Brian tells Drake, you know, I don't think your dad should be your manager anymore. I don't think it's worth. I think he's being like too pushy and all this.
Likes him. He's gonna keep you from getting parts.
And so Drake says, you know, and now I'm doing concerts because he was, you know, a Nickelodeon rock star or whatever. And he says, and Brian would come, and that was fine because Dan would come if it was like local in LA, but Brian would come if it was like in San Diego. Like he made a real big effort to go to all my concerts, and I thought that was weird. He was always sort of popping up, but then he wanted to host my 15th birthday party at his house, but all his friends were there. All of Brian's friends were there. And Joe says, when we were leaving, I looked at all the cards that the friends had given to my son, and so many of them were inappropriate for a 15-year-old. And he asked Drake about them. And Drake's like, I didn't even read I don't even know those people. I didn't read those cards. And it's all very grooming, weird behavior.
Right? And his pedophile friends all grouping around. It's just like
a bunch of teenage boys. Yeah.
And one boy too would be all adults and then Drake, and they'd go to Disneyland. It's like, what?
Like they're in some, it is so
it's
gross.
Beyond.
It is beyond.
It's beyond. So now Brian is grooming Drake, and he makes him believe that his dad is the problem and said, nobody is going to work with you if your dad's around. And Drake started to believe this, and his parents didn't get along. And so Brian used that, like, maybe you should just go with the mom. So Brian Peck now is getting into the mom's mind, saying Drake's never going to work because of your ex-husband. He's like really making everything bad. So Drake wouldn't stay with his mom for a week.
Fired.
Yeah. And they called his dad and fired him and said, mom called and said, Drake doesn't want you to be his manager anymore. And Joe cries and says, it's breaking my heart because I could see what was happening. But I knew if I kept pushing, it would sever my relationship with my son. So I turned everything over to the mom, the bank accounts, everything. But the one thing I told her was never leave Drake alone with Brian Peck. Never leave him unsupervised with that guy, ever. So you got to imagine the mom feels like shit now.
20 years later, he's still crying about it, the dad. It was so intense in the doc. I couldn't believe how sad it was.
So now there's a huge gap of time between the Amanda show and when Drake and Josh started shooting. And Drake's mom, I guess they lived in the OC, and she didn't like the driving back and forth, obviously. So Brian would come and take Drake to auditions. And then it would just be like, he has an audition in the morning. He should just stay at my house. It's like 16 years old now. And then Drake kind of goes into the story. He says one morning everything changed because he woke up to Brian Peck sexually assaulting him. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to react. He was 15. He had no car. He couldn't drive. He didn't know who to call, what to do. So it just became his secret. And he couldn't say, I don't want to go to his house, because then people would wonder why. And Brian would apologize. It'll never happen again. I don't know what came over me. I'm really sorry. And then the abuse got worse and worse. And Brian had convinced everybody, it's so great for Drake just to be at my house because I could take him to these auditions. You know, I'm really like helping him with his career. So Drake says he's not going to say exactly what it was. We do see it later in the court documents, but he says, just think of the worst things ever. It was extensive. It was brutal. It was violent. And you know, the worst things that came to my mind are the things that ended up happening. And he says, he looks back on it and says he wonders how he survived.
Like how women survive. That's how.
Yeah. He says,
I mean,
he looks back on the abuse and he remembers the abuse super clearly, but he doesn't remember other huge things, good things in his life that were happening, because he can't remember those things at all that were like cool things happening in his life with his career and everything and his family, but he can remember the abuse like completely clear. I mean,
I'm sure.
So heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking.
So heartbreaking.
And of course, and then he became an addict and
of course. Yeah. He's trying to mask it all. And he says, he just thought it was a big secret that he had to pray. But this is interesting. He was spending all his time with his girlfriend, and it took his girlfriend's mom no time to figure it out, because Brian and his weirdo friends were supposed to take Drake to Disneyland, and he wouldn't answer his phone. Then Brian, a grown 40-something-year-old man, starts nonstop calling the girlfriend's house. Why aren't you going with me to Disneyland? Let's go to Disneyland. And the girlfriend's mom was like, what the fuck's up with this guy? This grown man, like, what's happening? And asked him. And he just was evasive about it. And then that mom called Drake's mom and said, I think he's in danger. I think someone's hurting him, and took him to her kid's therapist. I have to think that Drake's mom probably looks back on that and feels horrible. You know,
the internet turned on her.
Yeah.
Turned on her. I mean, and he said he, I guess is supportive and understands how she was manipulated, but
that's got to be rough. I mean, that's got to be rough. If she's, imagine she's got to feel responsible. She's got to feel guilt, and I don't know.
She was warned. And I mean, and I'm sure the guy was charming. He fooled a lot of people in Hollywood and told everybody, it was consensual, I'm sure.
Right.
Which is
Yeah.
why Joanna Kearns and they're all defended him and stuff. But I just think, look, I'm pretty hard on that woman in my mind just because she was warned, and it goes beyond just that he was charming. You didn't want to drive your kid from OC to LA for auditions. Look, I get it. I don't want to drive myself for my own auditions, but then you should have sat down with your son and kept your ex-husband as manager. But you don't get to turn him over to somebody not related to him that you were warned about because you don't want to drive him to auditions. Or let his fucking learner's permit and drive his damn self at 15 and just break the law that way. But it's a terrible, awful situation all around.
Well, he still hasn't told anybody at this point. So they're reshooting the pilot for Drake and Josh, which hasn't come out yet. And now Brian starts trying to convince Dan to let Brian, be the dad on the show. And he says, no way, like, no way.
Right.
So one day he just couldn't take it anymore. And he told his mother everything, like what was going on. And it's been going on, at least a year or so now, because it was in between the Amanda show and Drake and Josh. And Mom called the police and the detectives. And he says he had to give excruciating details to these two strangers about humiliating details of what had happened to him. And then they did like a full-on like Dateline investigation, and they like called Brian and got him to admit on the phone everything he'd done, and they were recording it. And he said that the whole time that Brian was going, "Are you recording this? Are you recording this?" But then still was saying it anyway. I mean,
I don't know why. Yeah, that was weird. I don't know why he felt the need to. But yeah.
But he admitted everything.
Yeah, admitted everything. I don't know. But for Drake Bell, I would imagine part of his guilt and shame and all of that stuff has to be coming from a weird sense of cooperation and going back and being part of it, a willing participant, quote unquote, like whether he was coerced, whatever. Like I would imagine that's because that's always part of the manipulation and part of the
shame,
the surviving that is how do I live with myself for going
where
back?
are my parts in it? What everything did I do to
ask
why did I go back there? And now everybody hates my mom, but I'm the one who went there. I'm the one who told lies constantly. I was the one that wanted my career so badly. Every single survivor shame. I mean, everybody has it, no matter what situation where you're victimized and you find a way to be responsible for it. And that's why it's so fucked up.
It's so awful. And this is when Brian now has been arrested, and we see the list. They show the list, all the court documents of all the things that he did. But nobody knew that it was Drake that had filed the charges. And I think a lot of them were like willfully ignorant to like, I don't know who it was. It definitely wasn't our star that's about to be the star of this huge show, the Drake of the Drake and Josh. But Dan called Drake and asked him if it was him.
Exactly. Because anybody who's observing would
yes.
And Dan knew.
Yeah.
And Dan's trying to tell himself with his best buddy Brian and their, rape camps that they're holding or whatever, comedy camps.
Yeah.
That fine that maybe Dan's acting inappropriately with the girls and Brian's acting inappropriately with the boys.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Dan was hoping it stopped there, but he certainly knew exactly who it was pretty much right away. So I think it was obvious to people. Maybe not obvious, but I think it was anybody who was sensitive and observational would probably be like, I think they'd probably be able to figure it out.
I mean, and then we go into Drake has told this whole thing to the police and everything, but he didn't tell his dad because he knew his dad was going to be so devastated. But when his dad, the producer asked Joe, how did you feel when you found out that was your son in that court document? And he cries and he says, I'll never be the same. Nobody in my family will ever be the same. I don't wish this on any parent, any child. Like we're all changed forever. Mm-hmm. We're all changed forever. And you have to imagine Joe was like, and I saw it coming and she didn't do anything about it, but
that's just why I don't know. Kill him, to speak to Julie's point, because I think they knew he was going to go over there and commit a crime on that guy. Mm-hmm. And they didn't want him to do that. So that's the reasons. And it was like, he's like saying to them, oh, thank God it's not you. Thank God it didn't happen to you.
Yeah.
Poor Drake Bell was sitting there listening to him like, yep, good thing, Dad. And it's just like, and he's like,
Yeah.
that guy was after that, and knew that guy was bad news. And you just want it so badly for that dad, man. You just really.
So a few weeks after Dan's arrested, Drake and Josh is now shooting. And he says, this is great. This is all he ever wanted his whole life, right? But it's juxtaposed with the most traumatic experience of his life. And he didn't know how to process it. So that leads to self-destruction and self-loathing and the alcohol abuse, the substance abuse. He says, anything to escape. And the producer says, did anybody at Nickelodeon ever reach out to you? And he says, I don't know if anybody knew exactly who it was. The only person that was there for me was Dan, actually, because Dan's trying to cover his own ass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then at the sentencing for Brian, he was hoping that Brian was going to jail and never work with kids again, but that's not what happened. So how we roll into episode 4 is he said it was easy back then for him to go back and forth to the courtroom to watch the proceedings because the paparazzi wasn't there so much. Because today they would be like, these 4 people walked in. So one of these 4 is probably, they wouldn't have any respect for the victims. And he said Brian's whole side of the courtroom was full. On his side, it was him and his mother and his brother. Brian pled no contest to 2 charges of child sexual abuse. He got 16 months in jail, less than 2 years in jail, and had to register as a sex offender.
Again, I say less than 2 years in jail, less time than Jen Shaw,
Teresa and
Joe for committing fraud.
Yeah.
Again, somehow it's okay for a guy to rape a child.
Repeatedly for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, like in every way possible, but goes to jail for 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not even 2 years.
Not even 2 years. Barely over a year and a half.
A year and a half. Okay. Yeah. Well, then there you
go. And he has to register as a sex offender. So Kate Taylor, we're back to the cute journalist, Kate Taylor. She says she petitioned the court to see the letters of the people that supported Brian. There were 41 letters in favor of Brian. They had been under seal for 2 decades. Most of them were asking him, because he admitted what he did. So most of them were just asking him to get probation and no jail time. Many letters used the words temptations. He must have been horribly tempted to do something like this, blaming the victim.
Right.
But Dan Scheider, nobody from Nickelodeon wrote letters, but the people that were James Marsden, Taryn Killam, Alan Thicke, Tom DeSanto, Ron Melendez, Ryder Strong, Will Friedel, Joanna Kearns, Kimmy Robertson. And Joanna Kearns stated now that she has learned that her letter of support was based on complete information and she would have never written that letter. So there's so much victim blaming in the letter saying that he must have been pushed into some extreme temptation to make him repeatedly rape somebody over and over for a year. He must have been.
I don't know who gets tempted to and in general, I just want to say for all these people and their letters and their bullshit.
Yep.
I don't care if it was a kid or a regular or an adult person. If you're tempted if I'm coercing you or wanting you so badly to have sex with me, then actually I'm not being raped. However, I'm tempting you with my mere existence, which is the basis for women having to cover their heads and women covering their bodies. Because if they don't, men are so tempted.
Yeah, they can't control themselves.
They must rape.
They must.
That's what they're saying in those letters. It is unbelievable.
I was like, if he tells everybody, one, I think that the thing of your letters going to be sealed. And period, end of story, from now and forever, nobody should get to have if you're going to write a letter on behalf of someone who's under arrest, you best believe that shit needs to be posted on the front of Twitter. You better be ready to stand by it with your headshot on it. Like, yep, I wrote that letter. That's number 1. Number 2, okay, well, let's say it is consensual. And let's say Drake Bell was constantly, trying to get with him. Or if it was a girl, a 13-year-old girl, you could still go on to jail, sir.
Yeah.
I don't know what she wanted from you or what he wanted from you. You're 40-something and that's a 15-year-old and you don't get to. I was tempted.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It makes no sense. It's so much victim blaming. And they say this one couple, I guess they're a production director couple, the Carells, say they would be happy to work with him again. He's been amazing. And they do work with him again on the Sweet Like Zach and Cody for Disney. He's a registered sex offender, goes on to work for The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody on Disney. My kids did watch that show.
Yeah, that was the one.
Now, I might
twins.
be a kookalook. However, call me crazy. If I worked on a children's show and I had a checklist of the 3 things I'd be looking for when somebody applies for a job,
Yeah.
I think the number 1 thing would be to check if they're a sex offender, a registered sex offender.
It's just a quick. I
don't know. I
tap.
just Googled it just to see.
They didn't even need to.
I don't know.
They didn't need to Google it because they wrote a letter for him in his trial.
Oh, that's so even better.
Who he was.
So even better.
Then their message back was, their statement was like, "We were not in charge of hiring or firing or casting." It's like, okay, but you knew who got hired, and at that point, you just
right.
A human, where. Go to human resources, go to whoever, go to Nickelodeon, pick up the phone, and just go look. This isn't a good idea. Even if he was completely not guilty, but he did go to jail. The optics are bad.
Yes.
They knew exactly what the deal was, and they let him work on the show with these 2 little 10-year-old twins.
Yeah. Then there's another case in 2005. A guy named Azell Channel on the Nickelodeon lot. It's not explained really what he does, but he brought a kid with him onto the lot, probably to be like, look where I work. It seems like he was like doing a tour, and then abused that kid on the lot. Now we've got 3 predators that have been working at Nickelodeon. So now Nickelodeon expands its policy around freelancers, which probably that guy was like a security guard or something. And they're saying now it's pretty clear Nickelodeon should be examining its policy around children. But now the channel's getting more shows. We got Zoe 101. We got Victorious. We got Sam and Cat. We got iCarly. My kids did watch that. And of course, we got Drake and Josh. Dan Schneider, bigger, more powerful. So now we're talking about iCarly being such a big show because now we're going into the digital age and everything on the internet. And the Disney Channel now picks it up and starts to really compete. Now they're getting Hannah Montana. We've got Sweet Life. There's my kids watch all those Disney shows. But then we see Dan now is the digital age. He's being a creeper. He's walking around with a video camera, scaring people, scaring the children, coming up behind them, poking them to make them jump while he's videoing them.
That's the other thing with him, where he's not just like, he's like sadistic in a weird way.
Yeah.
Like he's not like a regular, like let's say Brian Peck, who's like just a sexual creep and is doing everything so that he can do his sex stuff on the kid, which is all obviously disgusting. But Dan Schneider is getting off on this
on fear.
Yeah. Yes. On fear.
It's the power of it.
Power.
And also,
that's what usually makes somebody sexually assault someone is power, getting off on the fear. That's usually the basis for it.
And maybe he's not R-ing because he gets to get off on it from 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. every day on the set.
Many ones all day long.
And just a jolt of it. He's getting like hard all day by getting all of it. And those little things with the video and going up to people and scaring them, like that's just another form of dominating and control and getting off on somebody's fear. It's like somebody rocking the
This is Julie's thing.
Somebody is fucked and you don't ever hang out with this person again if this is the person who, when you go on those, what is it called,
the Ferris wheel,
whether it's a Ferris wheel or anything that rocks, and you go, I'm scared, we have to stay still, and they rock it even more. That person is Dan Schneider.
Yes. I hate rides or anything like that. But when I was young and, you go to the fair, it's exactly like that. I'm like, I really don't want to do it, but okay. Like, I'm not going to be a party pooper. I'll do it. I'm fucking terrified. And then like, even on like the teacups thing, like you'd be like, oh, I don't like, I'm making me sick. And then people just turn it harder. So you're really spinning and you're really sick. And you're just like, but I'm cool. I love it. A ride. I'm not going to be the loser that says I don't like it, but I'm going to think about it. I'm 55 years old and still talking about it. Like, it's scary.
Yeah. When you express a fear and someone gets off on that,
and you're not in control too. That's like a specific nuance of all these scenarios, whether it's the dares, startling someone with a camera.
Yeah.
It's also like somebody that would dump water on your head if you weren't looking. Those kinds of pranks that are humiliating and demeaning, and you don't have control of your bodily autonomy and like yourself.
Yes. That is a red flag.
But now we're into the 2000s and he has the control at Nickelodeon. And now we're starting to see a lot of hyper sexualized kids show stuff. We've got lots of girls in bikinis. They're getting squirted with the water guns. Ooh, it's all wet. Ooh, slap me in the face with your sausage. Ooh, let me hop on that wood. The shake weight. We saw it on Victoria's, like jumping up from behind and like, ooh, let me, all these jokes that you're seeing now. Now we're seeing Zoe 101. We see Alexa Nicholas. She was on the show at age 12. She says that she could tell that she was what he was into, which was like skinny, tiny, cute little girl. She was meant to be that prototype. Now we see this costumer who is so scarred. She's not showing her face, only her hands. A costumer who says he liked the young girls to look flirty and fun. And then she nails it, I think, where she says, Dan had Arrested Development and he always wanted the young, cute girls to like him and they never did. So he's doing it over and over and over as an adult. And then we started getting into the whole thing about the massages.
And she also called out that he constantly did way too many close-up shots of their feet. And constantly too many, lotion squirts to the face or candy squirts to the face. And I mean, when they start showing these feet rubbing scenes and these feet scenes, and it's just like, ugh. And that's serial killer shit too.
But again, he's like an incel. He's like an incel.
Yes.
Who goes on a shooting spree, who thinks that they're so entitled. It's not even that you like them. That's the thing. It's not even like you like them. Like if a painter who has a muse and paints the same woman 500 times, or has a type that he or she loves and paints them and wants to revere them or whatever. He doesn't. He wants to demean them. He wants to own them. He wants to sit on them with his fat ass and control them. And I only say that because it's all we have. It's all we have of him. Okay. It's all we have. So it's like, because it's his fucking insecurity and we'll hold that over him. So he likes them, but he doesn't like them. He
hates them
because he can't fuck them.
Because it represents what he didn't get when he was younger, when he had to pretend to go to Harvard, or he got cast on head of the class, but he was the fat kid.
Right. Yeah. And even just get, like, you don't just get a human being. You don't get someone. Like, he's not even present in the situation. He's not even present in his own. That's like an incel. Like these guys, like, why won't these girls have sex with me? It's because you're a fucking douche.
Yeah.
Why don't you do something for someone? Why don't you show you're worthy of being liked?
Yeah.
But you don't, because all you care about is what you get. And it's just so gross.
Yeah. It's so gross. And then we see this Alexa actress. She talks about this scene, like you talked about earlier, with the they're opening some sort of a goo pop. And it's the squirting on Jamie Lynn's face and the close-up of it. And they're doing it over and over. And that's when she hears some males on the set saying it's a cum shot. And she doesn't know what that is. And then she goes, as an adult, when I saw it, she tears up and she goes, I'm like, that's a child. Like, it's not funny. She says all the adults' behavior on the set that day, like she thinks back on that specific scene because they kept having to do it over and over. And she said it was appalling. And then we get lots of shots of the feet and the licking things and the close-ups. And then with Victorious, because that was also based on like a web show, there were all these online extras and all the ones with Ariana Grande. All the ones with her pouring water on herself and I'm so stupid and what's this potato and awful.
Disgusting.
Disgusting. And then this whole thing about the massaging, and the costumer says for some reason it was always women in her department that needed to be working. He would call them, you've got to come massage him now. And, it's sexual harassment to make somebody touch you, much less massage you.
And he wants to be touched. And we all know massages are sexual. Okay.
Yeah.
They just are. They're not just relaxing. They're sexual. I mean, they are. So it's like, you're now getting this somebody touching you while watching. It's not like he's in his office.
Yeah.
Doing paperwork. He's watching the scenes of these kids. He's looking at kids being touched sexually, and he constantly wants to be massaged all day long.
Constantly.
And I'm just like, it just makes me think it's like when if your animal's in the room by accident when you're having sex or something and it's like not sexy. I don't want to be looking at kids.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, at any time, but I don't want to be watching them while I'm getting a sensual massage.
No.
I don't
No.
get a massage at work, but that's just me. But it's like, it's just gross that you're making women, you're calling some woman down from the wardrobe department.
Yeah, if you want a masseuse, get a guy who does fucking football players. He wears a white shirt.
Physical therapy guys, like,
yeah,
come on.
like he's from Rocky, and he's like, okay, now we do some time. Do that guy. But you don't. You call every woman who works in costume departments come fucking massage you. I swear to God, if I ever see Dan Schneider, I'm gonna fucking slap him across the face. He should wish to not be around me. Okay,
Van Nuys, watch out. So and the costumer is like, people have been massaging him on set now for 2 decades. They know it on both coasts. Like, we don't have anybody to complain to because everybody knows this.
That's the thing that really gets me upset. Even in the last episode, it's of it where it's like, or not even, you didn't even see it. It's Dan Schneider's stupid interview. You have to watch it. It's on YouTube. It's on his own channel. 5 minutes in, you'll get it. But he's like, I was surrounded by adults, execs on both coasts. I was surrounded by adults, parents, caregivers, gaffers, lighting guys, and, set teachers. And I'm just like telling Julie, I'm like, the amount of gaslighting of the acting like a set teacher who makes, maybe like $400 a day. I mean, set teachers make great money. It's very competitive. And it's the kind of thing where there's a pool of people and it's like somebody who like wrangles dogs and shit. Like, you know what I mean? There's only so many sets where you need a set teacher and it's very competitive. And they want the jobs. They're not going to walk up and be like, that's a little inappropriate. No, you'll never work again. So
he's the boss. He's the boss.
Nobody's going to tell you that they're not going to massage you.
No
one's going to tell you it's inappropriate that you're being massaged in front of kids.
Nope.
No one's going to tell you that don't shoot my kids' feet that way. No one's going to tell you. It's just ridiculous to act like with a look, to gaslight us all now. And like, why didn't a set teacher ever say anything? Nobody ever said anything.
Why didn't
people all lose their jobs?
Right. Not one person. There's how many people on how many sets over how many number of years watched all that go down as they do in every set. And not one person says anything. There's kids with parents grown. Even the crew probably has kids. And you don't look at that and go, huh, but no, we all just try to keep our jobs.
Yeah.
So 2014, Dan wins the Nickelodeon Lifetime Achievement Award. And then we see all the people coming up to talk about how, Dan changed my life. I wouldn't be what I am without Dan and how great he was. But the only person that didn't show up to kiss his ass was Jeanette McCurdy. And it was glaring because she's a star of a huge show, Sam and Cat. And then 8 years later, her memoir came out, I'm Glad My Mom Died. And in the book, she talks a lot about the creator being so abusive and he would openly humiliate you, call you fat, call you stupid, all these things. And if you didn't just take it or laugh or think he was hilarious, you would be fired on the spot. So Dan convinced everything he did was death content. Everything was like a full panic. And Scotchy says it's like a torture genius routine because if he's such an asshole to everybody, he must be a genius. And this is how he's been treated up to this point. They talk about Jeanette McCurdy. Her mom died in the book. And complaints were coming in about him. She was allowed to take 1 week off when her mom died. And she's like 16, 17. An investigation happened at this time. And it was found that Dan was the problem of the abuse on the set. So he was no longer allowed to be on set or interact with the cast, and which was the biggest punishment for him because he can't get his massages and he can't look at the kids and he can't yell at people.
Right.
He couldn't be trusted to treat people in a humane way. But they couldn't get rid of him because he was a hit maker. So now we see what we call in this podcast, the black screen of death. And it says, Dan Schneider says he was not barred from working with actors. He chose to give notes from his office. Now, all of a sudden, he wants to give notes from his office.
Yeah, and he does deny that on his stupid interview on YouTube.
Never
happened.
It was never happened. So in 2017, he's banned from working with his own 20 years. It's 3 years after he's been banned from working with his own actors on Sam and Cat, but he's back with 2 new shows, Henry Danger and Game Shakers. But something has shifted against Dan at this time, and it's the Me Too movement. So the costumer says she's finally had enough, and she felt emboldened by the Me Too movement to it gave her the space to talk about this hostile work environment and on behalf of the people that worked under her. She felt like she could finally tell the union about Dan's inappropriate behavior towards her and other people that worked for her. And the union rep tells her, well, you're not the only one that's complained about this guy. So now in 2017 is when all the rumors are exploding. And he was ousted completely from Nickelodeon in March of 2018. And she was like, Nickelodeon, the costumer says, Nickelodeon literally changed the locks on the empire that he built. And he was in one day, out the next day. Reportedly, he got about $7 million to go away, which really isn't that much money.
Yeah, that really isn't.
But it was a quick, sharp break. They acted like they never knew him. Who dat? And there was never any evidence of inappropriate sexual behavior. It was just he was horribly abusive in the workplace. Now, Dan Snyder has stated, another Black screen to death, he stated, this is not an accurate description of why he and Nickelodeon parted ways. But today, he would absolutely do some things differently. He's learned over the years how to be a better boss.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what he said on a stupid fake canned interview, that he he regrets some of the things that happened and he's embarrassed and it was just all bullshit.
He wouldn't have anyone massage him.
Yeah. Like
he wouldn't have anybody massage him now. He would hire a professional. Yeah.
Right. Sorry that he made the writer's room so toxic and he was just under so much pressure.
Yes, he was under so much pressure.
He's teeing himself up to come back because just like many problematic men and women, I guess, who were fired in Me Too are circling back around again.
Right.
You know,
the
boomerang of cancel culture. They're like, oh no, they'll be hired again.
I'm just waiting for Matt Lauer to come back. So everybody's happy. The actors that they interviewed, the costumer, the journalist, everyone's happy. Like, it's a long time coming for him just to get the fuck out. But a lot of his shows are still in the air. You can find them, Hulu, Disney Channel, whatever, and popular. But the actors are all adults now, and they re-examine that world they grew up in. And we see Alexa again from Zoe 101, and she cries and says, I was not happy. I was crying every day and not wanting to go to work every day. And my self-worth is completely damaged by this experience. Raquel says when she was fired from the Amanda show, she went down a dark path at a young age because she was shown everyone is replaceable. Like I said, they don't give them any skills to cope with this, that you're gonna, Leon said he's dealt with alcoholism that's directly related to the industry and not being able to maintain his success. Katrina says she wanted to try college and be normal, but she had no idea what that looked like. She didn't know how to do that.
Right.
They all struggled with acceptance and beauty standards. And then the people that were criminals were just disappeared.
Yep.
So that made them realize, like, in this world and in this industry, you can trust no one. Drake says after Drake and Josh, he made another album. He got to make cool movies and he would have stints of sobriety, but his demons were very difficult to work through. And he went through bankruptcy. He lost his house. Then we see a lot of other examples of child entertainers. We see flashes of Corey Haim, Corey Feldman, Drew Barrymore. She's doing all right. Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, Edward Furlong, Aaron Carter, Amanda Bynes. I mean, the list just goes on and on. And Saatchi says that Amanda is a very typical child star study. And it's interesting, too, because I kept waiting for this documentary to turn to Amanda Bynes because we got so much on Drake Bell. I'm like, now are we going to turn to Amanda Bynes? But because I guess they have nobody, her parents don't have anybody from her side giving her side, that they weren't going to delve into it, because it's still ongoing and so sad. Drake tells us that, he had sobriety issues, he DUIs, he was very lost. And then he says, I did plead guilty to inappropriate text with a minor, but he was never charged with doing anything physical. He got on 2 years probation, 200 hours community service. He says he took accountability for his wrong actions, but the media had so much misinformation that it completely destroyed him. We see police reports where he went missing. He went to rock bottom. He went to treatment. He's been through trauma therapy, grief therapy. And he felt that he was surrounded by people who, for the first time in a long time, really wanted him to get better. Then we see all these child actors are saying what they need is more support, more mental health checks. And just because a parent or a teacher is supposed to have eyes on the kids at all times, they don't. And there has to be an environment where the kids aren't susceptible to dangers. Now, we get this long statement from Dan and Nickelodeon that I'm not even going to read. But basically, is what you're saying is Dan saying, most of this isn't true. I wasn't fired. I wasn't, he's just saying none of this is true, basically. And I guess they're pulling this from his statement or whatever was his YouTube special that he did about himself. Is Dan Schneider married? Did anybody marry him?
He was married. I did look it up. I don't know if he's still married, but he did get married.
Well, somebody married Harvey Weinstein too. So, I mean,
that's true.
Yeah, someone attractive. I mean, it was just offensive for him to be getting massages like that, just on the thing of him just being married.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true. That's
the least of his. I mean, that's the least of his offenses. And then episode 5, to me, it was great, but it really wasn't what I was hoping for. I was hoping there was going to be more child actors, but this was really just Soledad O'Brien doing some interviews. We got Drake in Mexico, where my daughter claims he's fled to. He says, and then I looked that up, right? Because I was like, what's the deal with the Mexico thing? In 2019, he went on his social media and said, my social media will now only be in Spanish, and my name is Drake Campana, which means bell. Campana means bell. And but now he says that's not it at all. And his new song is in English, but he must have been going through something. But he said in 2019 were these allegations from his ex from when he was 16. So I don't know if it's the same girl whose mom helped him get help. But he said, yes, when I broke up with this girl when I was a teenager, we did say terrible things to each other. It was never physical. And she needs to stop saying that because I'm going to pursue legal action. She did just ask me for money last year. So I was okay to ask money from last year. But now she's on TikTok saying he's saying there was no physical abuse. She's saying it was verbal abuse. Either way, the guy has been through grief and trauma therapy, and we can only hope he's on a better path because what was done to him as a kid obviously led into current behavior. I mean, obviously. We see this Will Friedle, who I don't know who that is, but he was on a podcast saying, he realizes now he was on the wrong side of the court when they supported Brian Peck. They were given the wrong information. Drake says any of these people that have come forward now to say they were on the wrong side of the law, no one has reached out to him to say they're sorry. Jason Handy, had been arrested, Brian Peck, but those two cases happened so close, same network, same show. Brian has now worked on other shows, and he's a registered sex offender.
Like we said.
Soledad asked him about Amanda Bynes. He doesn't know anything, so he doesn't say much. Drake talks about his father and how great he is, of course. And he says he does have a great relationship with his mother, but people, of course, did go after his mother after the documentary came out. But he does understand, like you said, that Brian could pull the wool over anyone's eyes. He was so manipulative and so charming. And, she asked him about Josh, Drake and Josh, what's been his reaction to this. And he says, it's a difficult thing for my friend to process. We have a really rare and special bond. He's a great person. We're great friends. Now, Drake has a new song and a new video, and I thought the song was pretty good.
You liked it?
I mean, I'm not going to download it, but I thought it was all right.
The song was better than the video. I thought the video was a little...
I didn't understand if I was watching a video or if I'm still watching what we were... Why is he now bleeding in a car?
Right.
Yeah. But the song, I mean... Yeah, I thought the song wasn't bad.
Yeah, I didn't think it was bad. So then I don't know what his other music is like. So then we get Giovanni and Brian, all that cast members. And we see this video that you're talking about. We just see some snippets of this Dan's apology and stuff. And Dan saying, if I would have known what was going on at the time, I just would have changed it. And Brian says, I think the whole thing is funny. I think the whole interview is funny. Dan's an actor. I think it was a performance. And where was his apology when Jeanette McCurdy's book came out? Where's this? There's no accountability here. He's not taking any accountability for anything.
Nope.
And it reminds me, Ray Payne, when you said Dan Schneider was covering his own ass. It's like Drake Bell can't even see the forest for the trees of just seeing that. Like, there's a real reason why you didn't hear from anyone from Nickelodeon, and the only person you heard from was Dan Schneider. Dan Schneider stood to lose his whole entire fucking empire because he stood right by there and let you get for years. He could see what was going on, and he didn't want to lose everything because of it. I mean, he turned a blind eye to that. I just know for a fact.
Totally. Totally. And this is interesting too with Brian and Giovanni. They talk about the jokes going over their heads and now they see it lens through an adult and how gross it was. And Brian's like, the foot stuff to me was especially crazy. And if the adults are laughing, the kids go along with it, but we don't get it. And then we see a clip of Dan saying diversity was so important to him.
Yeah.
Look at Keenan and Kel. And Giovanni and Brian go, the thing is they're asking him about the two of us saying there was no diversity on the cast. There's not even another Black person working there. And then when he's asked about it, then he dismisses us again by only talking about Keenan and Kel. You know, like he doesn't even
what do you mean there's no diversity? I have a Black friend. What are you talking about? I know Jews. Like, just get the fuck out of here. He's such a piece of shit. Can't stand him. I hope he fucking gets what he deserves. He's so gross, gaslighting, undermining, incel asshole who just all we can hope is that nobody lets him on a set again.
Can you believe though that he called this girl, Giovanni, called her and asked her to give a quote of support, knowing she was in the documentary, said, can you just give me, just throw me some support? And she was like, no. It's because she came back later and did a spot on this other show, Henry Danger. And he says, but you came back. And so like, I brought you back to work. And she said, I'm going to tell you the truth. I was terrified of you. I was intimidated by you and I wanted to do a good job and I needed to work. And no, I'm not going to give you a quote of support. I was like, you go girl.
Yes. Yeah, good.
Yes. Now we get Brian and his mom, Tracy, which was pretty heartbreaking to know that really this is like a 36-year-old man and he's been estranged really from his mom all this time because of when he got fired that day and he felt it was his mom's fault. And being a part of the documentary is what changed the relationship. And they talk about how the first time they really spoke was Valentine's Day. And they're both able to realize now what happened in the relationship. And it wasn't anybody's fault necessarily. Then we see a clip of, I think her name is Rachel or Raquel, from the documentary, who was a Black girl being told just to take it and being pulled to the side when I guess Jamie Lynn Spears was over and over, like having to spit in her face. And she was told just to take it and don't cause problems, just to take it. And Tracy and Brian, the mom and son, are watching it and they're like, well, this is racist. They're just telling this, one Black girl on the set just to take it, let them spit in your face over and over and don't cause any problems. And talking about the pressure on just the one Black cast member to represent for all the Black boys and girls is and the people of color is that part was compelling. And I'm glad they included it. Oh, there's a dog.
It's a cat.
Oh, it's a cat. It's somebody with a sweater.
Yeah.
And then the last person that we get is this guy, Shane Lyons, who said he also was like a fat kid and wanted to be like the Chris Farley. Like he was always trying to make everybody laugh. And he was on the second iteration of all that. And he said he thought this would be a great stepping stone for him to get into a career of comedy. But he was 16 and got fired after one season and was never told why. And it was like a death. But he says, my parents were both chefs, so I had options. I had something to fall back on, but most of these kids have nothing to fall back on. They're just left afloat, and they thought this was their career, and they're not given any tools to deal with it. He said he was on a set with Brian Peck. He thought Brian Peck was charming. They were all enamored by the fact that he was an adult that they could talk to. And he thinks it's very brave of Drake Bell to go on TV and admit what happened. He feels lucky it wasn't him. And he does realize now, looking at it, that Brian Peck did make passes at him, but he didn't know it at the time. And like talking about blue balls, and he's like, I was 13 years old. Like, I didn't know what blue balls was, but then he explained to me what it was. It's grooming. It's grooming.
Brian Peck told the kid he was giving him blue balls?
No.
When they were walking out, he said something like, blue balls, am I right? And the kid was like, uh-huh. And he goes, you know what blue balls are, right? And then he explained it to him. So
definitely.
Wow.
Shane says he thinks there should be more safety in place for kids on the set because currently the way the law is now, if someone is a convicted sex offender, they can go on set with kids there as long as there is a parent or guardian there. That's the loophole. Can you believe that? That's crazy.
No.
And then so if a parent or guardian is there, then you can have a sex offender on set because your parent's in charge of you. But that's exactly what happened to Drake Bell. Like exactly what happened to him.
Right. Wow.
Dan is, he's like, Dan is shirking the responsibility of this. Like nobody believes his bullshit. Then we bring out everybody and they talk about the impact of the documentary and Soledad thanks them and all this. And I just wonder if this is going to be a little bit of an ongoing thing because they, we had 1 through 4 and then they sort of dropped episode 5 3 weeks later. So, I mean, I kind of hope it is. I kind of hope it's a recurring dialogue.
It did seem like a sort of an afterthought, that episode. And I do hope they keep kind of making them, or like keep doing interviews and tacking them on to
more and more people. Yeah.
I think that'd be really interesting. And because we want the conversation to continue. I need Dan Schneider to be sued or Nickelodeon in some kind of class action, whether it be with, the parents and the trauma that they've gone through with the relationships with their kids, with the fact that almost every kid has ended up an addict. I'm sure they were out a lot of money treating their issues. And you can tell that the set was, all of these shows had a toxic work environment. So I want something to happen, whether it be Nickelodeon has to take all those shows down because they're continuing to make money hand over fist for those shows. Something.
But are the actors getting residuals? You think?
It just depends. It really does. If they were, it might not be because the streaming deals are very, very whack. It's one thing if they syndicate it and they put it on like TBS or another.
Yeah. Okay.
Get money from that. But streaming deals are. But yeah, I'm sure they might not want them to be taken down. But somehow Nickelodeon needs to be hit financially, and so does Dan Schneider. And I think they should all. I'm sure some lawyers Tom Girardi's up in there looking to whatever, Michael Avenatti, whoever.
Yeah. They should be. Yeah.
If Tom Girardi's doing it, you guys don't give him your money. Don't do it. It's not going to turn out. We're going to be done, but 2 things I want to discuss. I'd like to circle back to an hour and 40 minutes ago, Brandy, when you told me you were a model in Tokyo. What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's just a little tidbit that I didn't know about you.
I was a model as a kid. Yeah, and I did modeling in Tokyo for like 2 months when I was 15. I lived there by myself. With
wow.
Other models.
You were like in a model apartment with other models?
Yes. I'm sure getting molested left and right. I was a pretty mature kid. I kept thinking during this documentary, I kept thinking I don't really know if I would have understood that it was like those were cum shots, but I would have known that what was being done to me was sexual. It was a sexual joke. I definitely always could sense that.
You don't know exactly what, but like, the parents of the kid, it's probably something about sex. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't want to ask anybody because I don't want to act like I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. And the next thing I want to ask you about, Julie, you have, I saw a clip on your Insta. Did you have like a comedy special? Like what's happening with that?
Oh, thank you. I was actually a part of a series of comedy specials on Wow Plus. It's called House of Laughs. So I was just one of many gay comics that were on
Wow Plus. World of Wonder does Drag Race. So Wow Plus has all the Drag Race on there. It's a streaming platform.
And it's
I'm sure I have it.
Yeah, probably.
I'm sure I have
6 or 7 episodes. I don't know how many. But it was like me and 2 other comedians and a drag queen, and we did our sets and like a Comedy Central special, but on World of Wonder Plus. It was like that.
Okay. All right. Well, I saw your clip and I was like, I gotta go find this. I've never seen you do like a full stand-up thing, like unless it's like at a dinner table. Yeah.
Yeah. Check it out. I don't know how much they edit it down to, but with those things, probably 7 minutes. Who knows? I haven't watched it.
Well, you guys, I've told you about Julie and Brandy's podcast, Dump Gay Podcast, and it's their Patreon is where you got to go because I literally was describing in the car to my husband it was right after I left LA, so several weeks ago, and I texted you guys. You've written a whole thing about like the Grateful Dead and Chris Robinson, and I was trying to tell my husband, I go, it's not going to make any sense. I have to play it for you because my husband and I are like deadheads and all this. And I was like, they were describing Chris Robinson as like the cousin that shows up at the barbecue that you're like, what's wrong with him? And he was like, that is what he's like. He's like the redneck cousin that shows up, like, hey, but he can really sing, and that's weird.
sing.
He can
So
sing.
good. He can. He can
I
sing.
think that's not as weird as you being a deadhead, Mary Payne. That was pretty
Really?
shocking to me. I was like, all right, I guess Mary Payne and her husband like to get down. We know what goes on at those deadhead, those like Dead and Co shows and like all that. That's why we talk about it, because I want to go where the adults all do drugs. That sounds
Yeah.
fun. So I got.
Well, we're not doing. Listen, I'm not saying what happened in college days in college. I'm just saying when I was a deadhead when I was younger, it was more of that vibe.
Yeah.
But as an adult, you know, it's like when they go into like drums in space, the shit that you hate because it's like a 10-minute drum solo. That's when Mama sits down. I'm like, I'm gonna just be right here. Like, I'll just check my email while that's happening. Like, yeah. But no, to go to dead shows just to watch the deadheads is really, it's really an experience, especially if they're really in their zone. Something.
Yeah,
We call it this spinning. Yeah.
So
We're going to
that's gonna be
Vegas. Yeah.
You know, there's people, they sell whippets out front and they do all
geez.
yeah.
By the way, the deadheads don't need any legal anything. They have Shakedown Street. You go over there, you get whatever you want. It's just all out in the open down there. Yeah.
Oh,
Somebody
wow.
sent me the other day where Shakedown Street's going to be in Vegas because they can't do it like at the arena. So it's going to be at this other place. I was like, well, we got to at least go check it out.
So at a Dead concert, if you're looking for drugs, you go to Shakedown Street. That's the area of the, like on a gay cruise, there's a dick deck. So at a Dead
dick
concert,
deck.
There's but now there's Shakedown Street.
Well, Shakedown Street is just a series of vendors, right? And they've got like your t-shirts and your pot brownies and your kebabs. And it's these people that just travel with the dead. That's all they do. I don't know what they do in the off season. Maybe they follow fish. I don't know. But they've got their campers and they set up their shops. And so you could get like jewelry, t-shirts,
right?
Chicken on a stick, a pot brownie. Right. Just ask. It's any mushrooms, whippets, whatever you want. It's all there on Shakedown Street, but it's rows and rows and rows of vendors.
That's cool.
It's the most interesting, cool people you've ever seen in your life because this is what they've done their whole life. So, I mean, one guy I was talking to, I was like, how many shows have you been to? And he's like, I don't know, like counting when Jerry was alive. I go, yeah, counting then. He's like, 20,000? What? He's done nothing else his whole life. This guy's like 60 years old. He's done nothing else his whole life. I was like, what are you going to do when this ends?
Wow.
I was like, are you going to follow Widespread Panic? Maybe.
Damn. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's really, really interesting. The Deadheads are everybody's real nice.
One, because I have a dog and we have a new dog named Goose. I think there's like a new jam band coming up called Goose.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that might be new on the horizon. Check it out, Mary Payne. Because we have to have something, but people do like fish. I'm not against getting into, I just want to get into the best one, I guess.
Well, you got to get into the Dead's the best one, obviously. It's the OG. A lot of people follow Pearl Jam around like that, just like they do Dave Matthews. So if you're into Pearl Jam, you could follow Eddie Vedder around.
That's
true.
Fun.
Could do that.
They
could
don't
do that.
Sound as cool.
No. Well, no, they don't. They'll be
the people aren't as cool.
No, they'll be too earnest and annoying and like no, I can't be dealing with that.
Deadheads seem happier.
Definitely seem happier.
Yeah. Everybody's happy. All the music is good vibes, man.
That's good.
Well, I'm glad that I surprised you with my deadheadness. I'm multi-layered, guys. Multi-layered.
Yeah. People go to our Patreon, like Mary Payne said. That's where it's at. Yeah. We have video. You can join for $4 a month. Come out hour long every Wednesday.
I feel like you guys put out 2 things a week. Do you put out 2 things a week?
3. We put out 3. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But you can join for $4 and just get Wednesdays.
Okay. Well, I join whatever gets me all of it. I belong to whatever that is.
So you have the video and everything?
Yeah, I get the video. I get it all.
Yeah. So we have a video tier for the video queens, but we like to let people get in just at $4, see if they like it.
Yeah, it's great. And also, you guys, you can find like free clips. You have a website. Is it
JulieandBrandy.com?
Okay. Yeah. All right, everybody find everything about Julie and Brandy at JulieandBrandy.com, Dumb Gay Podcast, and then their Patreon. And of course, please follow me. I'm out here begging for Instagram followers like always at Pink Shade Pod. And I'll talk to you gals later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.